morning, Miss Smith. How are you today?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Good. I really want to start off this conference by saying that this is going to be slightly different than our usual conferences. We will be focusing on Joe's National Achievement Test results that we just got back for this year. First, though, I would like to say that Joe is doing very well in his social development since we met last time. He has made a lot of friends and has become more confident in himself as an individual. I might also mention that his work performance has been getting better as well. I do have his portfolio here of all his work from our classroom that I will be referring to as we go along with the test results.
Okay, great. But what is this National Achievement Test and when did Joe take it?
Okay, well the test is called the Iowa Test of Basic Skills and Joe took it on February 3rd of this year. And don't worry, this test is given to all 4th graders in San Antonio. The objective of the National Achievement Test is to show us what your child has learned over the past year. They do this by comparing our students' scores to what we call a norm group and national standards or criterion. And with that information, if you look at the test results here, you can see that it's divided into two parts. The top portion is the norm reference, and the bottom portion is the national standards or the criterion reference.
Okay, but what is a norm group?
Great question. Let me talk about what the norm group and the norm group reference is first. The norm group is a group of students that are given this test prior to our students taking the test. It is basically a comparison group. It is given to over 2,500 students all across the country that have similar economic, ethnicity, age, gender, and language demographics of our area in San Antonio. As you can see, the norm reference section is divided up into subjects such as reading, language, math, social studies, and science. These subjects are then divided up into subtests. For example, the reading portion is divided into vocabulary and reading comprehension. Language has spelling, capitalization, punctuation, and usage and expression. Do you see what I'm talking about, and did you have any questions about this?
Yes, I do see what you're talking about, and I do have a question. What is the core total and composite that I see in bold?
Great question. The core total focuses on the basic skills such as the reading, language, and math. That is why you see it right under those three sections. The composite total focuses on all the skills, so that is going to include the social studies and science skills. Also, if you look to the right of the subjects, subtests, and the core and composite names, you will see Joe's different types of scores. The first score you see is the standard score. That is basically just a raw score that is plugged into a formula to come up with a standard for this particular test. The GE you see right next to that is the grade equivalent that this test believes Joe's level is at. Now real quick, that does not mean that Joe needs to be at that grade level. It just means that other students at that grade answer the questions the same way Joe did. Therefore, it does not necessarily mean Joe needs to move up or down to the grades listed in this column here, but instead that students at those particular grade levels score the same as Joe did in those areas. Now if you look next to that, there's a national stay-9. That is a scale of 1 to 9 that shows where Joe falls on a bell curve. I know this is a lot to take in, but bear with me and I will explain all of these more with an example so you fully understand each of them. Also, please feel free to interrupt me at any time to ask questions when needed. Did you have any questions as of now?
No, I'm good right now, thank you.
Okay. Next to the national stay-9 is the national percentile score. Now this is not a percent that Joe scored from a 100% scale. This is a percentage higher or lower than what the norm group tested at. If you look right next to this score, it is also shown in a band format for a better visual. The shaded area of the bands basically shows you the spread of percentile that the test graders believe Joe would score between if he took it multiple times. The white dot you see is the actual percentile that Joe fell in.
Okay, so how did Joe do in vocabulary?
Okay, perfect. We will use that vocabulary scores as an example to reading the results. So let's go over the scores we just talked about and focus on the vocabulary. And if you look at the results, you can see that he made a 210 on his standard score. If you look at this bell curve right here, I have written in the standard score range right here. For the 4th grade, it is 183 to 210, with the average being right here, yeah.
Okay.
The average being 200. As you can see, this means that Joe is above average vocabulary. The next score you see here is the grade equivalent. Joe received a 5.5 for GE. That implies that Joe scored what a 5th grader in their 5th month of school would have scored in this vocabulary portion of the test. Again, this does not mean that he should move up from the 4th grade to the 5th grade early. This is just what an average 5th grader in the 5th grade, in the 5th month of school would have scored for this portion of the test. The next score you see is the NS or the national stay-9. Joe scored a 6 for vocabulary. This means, going back to the bell curve, that on this bell curve, which is 1 through 9, with the average being a 5, that Joe is above average in vocabulary according to the national stay-9. The last row of scores you see is the one labeled NPR, or National Percentile Rank, and Joe scored a 75 in vocabulary.
Whoa, wait, you just told me Joe was above average, and now you're saying he got a 75?
I can see how that's confusing. This is not a percentage, it is percentile. If you look at the bell curve once again, I will show you how a percentile differs from a percentage. You can see here that the percentile starts from 1 and goes up to 99, with an average of 50. Since Joe scored a 75 and the average student his age scored a 50, therefore he is above average with his vocabulary.
Okay, thank you. I really understand this norm group now. But you had mentioned something earlier about a criterion reference group. What is that?
Good question. The criterion scores give information on how Joe performed on the specific standards or objectives. As you can see, it is also broken down into different items. The first column is the total number of questions asked on the exam. And in the second column is how many Joe attempted to answer. Then, when you move to the third column, you will notice a %CSTU. This is referring to the percentage of questions answered correctly. The last column has a %CNAT. This is referring to the percent correct for students in this grade level within the nation. Okay, to the right, you can see the label rank with horizontal bar graphs underneath it. The shaded part of the bar graph basically shows you the spread of answers that the test graders believe the student would have scored between if he took it multiple times. The black bar indicates what Joe ranked this time. On that note, would you like to look down the list and see if there are any subtest areas that you do not understand?
Yes, actually. I'm curious about the scores right here, names, organizations, and groups. It looks like Joe scored a 0. Why didn't you tell me he was doing this bad?
Oh, don't worry, he's actually not doing bad in that area. I actually have his portfolio here, and I can show you how he is doing in the class activities and assignments. Unfortunately, at the time the test was administered, we had not studied this content area of the organizations and groups. But when we did get to it, Joe understood it very well. Therefore, if this test were to be given now, he would have done much better on it. As you can see here in his portfolio that I just gave you, he is doing very, very well in this area, and now that we have gone over it in class.
Okay, great. That makes more sense.
Was there any other subtests that you wanted me to review?
No, that was it.
Okay, well there are a few areas I do want to talk about. First, I do want to talk about Joe's results for organization of ideas. Joe did score 100% in this area, and I am thoroughly impressed with this result. I truly believe that this score reflects his work in class as well. Let me show you some more work in class. As you can see in this assignment that I had given him, to write an outline about clouds, he created this organized chart that vividly expresses all of his ideas for the paper. This score was well deserved. The next subtest I really did want to talk to you about was words with affixes. Joe scored a 17% in this area. This is something that he is also having trouble in our in-class assignments, as you can see with this activity we did. He seemed to not fully understand what the difference between a prefix and a suffix is.
Well, what can I do to help him with this?
This is something that is easily fixed, and you can work with him on this at home, as we are doing many activities in class. There are many online activities you can do with him, as well as playing word games, where you will help him find either the prefix or suffix of a word. The handout I have here, which I will be giving you at the end of our conference, has all the websites and many activities that you can do with him at home. Lastly, though, I do want to talk about one area of subtests, and that is his scores in history. For history, Joe did score a 100%. This is really great, and I'm very proud of his work. This also reflects his classwork, and as you can see in his history portfolio, he seems to always score a 95% or higher in all assignments. I am looking forward to seeing him continue to shine in this area and other areas. Did you have any other questions?
No, I think you covered it. Thanks.
Great. Well, I do have this handout that I was referring to. It has all the explanations of the test scores I just went over, as well as websites and other activities that you and your student can do in his struggling areas. Thank you so much for meeting with me today, and please feel free to call or email me if any other questions come up in the future. My contact information is written on the bottom of that paper. I love having Joe in my class, and I cannot wait to see him grow in the next class.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.